Gathering resources in the open field of Call of Dragons is a no brainer when it comes to wanting to progress your account, whether if you're free to play, pay to win, no matter how big or small of a spender you are, you're gonna have to gather resources eventually. So stick around in this video because I'll be teaching you all the good practices that you can use in order to maximize your resource gathering capabilities and stay ahead of the competition. What is up, guys? Meower here, back with a brand new Call of Dragons video. So, gathering resources. Pretty easy, right? Wrong. It is far more complex than you might think than just sending out a march to the following resource tile and wait for your marches to come back. You can actually make it far more efficient than you might think. So in this video, I'll be breaking down the best practices that you can do in order to make yourself as efficient as possible when it comes to gathering resources and maximizing your field time gathering uh, all the resources you possibly will need to progress your account further than your competition. Now, the first thing we're going to review is resource gathering buffs. So as we can see here in the economic buffs of the Hall of Order, we're going to be looking at every single gather speed. So we can see here the fastest resource gathering are always going to be gold, wood, than the normal ore and mana, and for good reason, because when you start gathering, this buff is not actually appearing as you would think for two main reasons: commanders and their talents and how you spec them. Plus, there are other influences such as the item and the artifacts. Now, what I mean by item, I mean this item, the overall enhanced gathering for either 24 hours or 8 hours. As to where you can get this item, it is usually sold in the Goblin Shop for resources, which I highly recommend you pick up whenever you see, and try to always have any of them on. There is no downside to having them on, as it is kind of, it will be a sort of a muscle memory thing that you will need to build up as you play Call of Dragons, because it will help you quite a lot in gathering resources and really reduce the time needed from the march to go to finish the tile and come back home with all the juicy resources. That is for tip number one. Tip number two, which I highly recommend, use the correct corresponding commander when it comes to gathering a resource. So, what does that mean? You'll notice that currently in Call of Dragons there are four main gathering and one pseudo gathering, which is Ordo. Ordo might not have any might not have access to the gathering tree, but he does have a gathering boost from his skills. While other gathering commanders do have resource gathering skills, but also have access to the gather talent tree. Now, as we said, there are 5 commanders that have the gathering skills and 4 specialize in gathering due to talent tree. So what you want to do is set up your talents correctly. What you want to build up on those talents is build up on the main skill, because you'll notice that every single gathering commander has the standard gather speed and then an extra bonus for a certain resource. So for example, Kella has a bonus for gold, Ordo has a bonus for mana, Chaka has a bonus for ore, Pan has a bonus for also wood, and Indus also has a bonus for wood. So usually what you want to do is when you start specking your talents, you'll have access to all of those juicy gather speed bonuses. What we will use as a basis of every single commander when it comes to specking their starting foundation talents, we're going to go for Earth's Grace, we're going to go for overall speed, and we're going to go for Logistics Master, followed by Transforming Spirit. Transforming Spirit is totally irrelevant, but it is the only way in order to progress further. However, when we start branching into the gather tree, we're going to start with Earth's Grace, as usual, because we always want to get the extra XP. And then we're going to improve her gold gathering even further. So if it was in this or pan, we would have gone for the wood gathering. But for Chaka and Ordo, since they are mana and ore respectively, they are at a bit further. So it'll be more based on your preference which one you want to spec up first, because usually when you're specking a talent, the talents for the gathering commanders, you want to reach the third Earth's Grace as soon as possible in order to get up to 50,000 XP from 52,000 XP from gathering resources every single day, which will help you progress your commander's levels fast as well. But that will be a topic for a different video. Back to the topic at hand. When it comes to specing your talents correctly, what you want to do is, after you get the main one for your gathering skill, but Chaka will be the exception because you will not have the extra talents. So for Indus, Pan, and Kella, we're gonna go for Mana Master as the secondary, because mana will be one of the most important resources that you will ever have to gather in Call of Dragons, because not only is it high demand later on in the game, it is also super slow to gather due to the nature of the smaller than usual nodes, so you'll need longer periods of time to gather as much mana as you would gather gold, wood, or ore. Next up, you'll notice that there is Joyful Burden or Quick Harvest. We're always going to go for Quick Harvest. The increase of 20% gather speed will always outshine the reduction of the 10% load capacity, which is, in the hindsight, absolutely nothing, and will only make you have to send out 5,000, at most 5,000, roughly around that number of workhorses extra to send out a march, which is nothing, because the biggest march you'll need to gather resources when you are fully maxed out everything is around 34,000 workhorses to finish up a 1.2 million node, which you want to finish as soon as possible in order to send out again. It doesn't matter the load capacity. Next up, we're gonna go for transport speed in order to move your units faster to again cycle around the resource nodes. And then of course we're going to go for an extra logistics master in order to get another 15% gather speed. And finally we're going to go for Earth's Grace, and then Windfall is my preference personally because of the extra chests. You might argue Lay of the Land is better. I haven't really done the math on that part. So if you have and you think Lay of the Land is better, please do let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear the math breakdown of it because I haven't done it, to be honest. That is it when it comes to specking your talents correctly. Ordo, however, is an exception, so we're going to go for the standard Earth Grace, overall speed, logistics master, and then shield of stability. I will make a special video for Order later on explaining engineerings as well and the basic mechanics of engineering and how to maximize it. But for now, keep it as standard as possible for the foundation talents, and I will post his video soon. That's it for specking the talents of your commanders. One extra tip I really want to emphasize on is try to max out the second skill of the commanders in order to maximize the gather speed, because that is usually what you use these commanders for. I did a mistake on in this here. I didn't max her first skill, which is the first mistake I did with her, and I also didn't max her second skill, which is the second mistake on her. So I kind of messed up her skills specking, which is my mistake, of course. Pan is also the same boat. You want to finish up her first skill, followed by her second skill. Kella, Ordo, and Chaka don't really matter because they are common commanders, so they kind of appear in almost every other pull, so you're going to max them pretty quickly over time. For tip number 3, knowing which faction to choose at which phase of the game you're in. So usually in the early phases, before you're done with talents, before you're done with the technology and the economy tree, before all that, you wanna grab the League of Order for two main reasons. One, they get an overall gather speed buff of 10%. Two, their workhorses have a higher load capacity. Now, what does that mean? It means is that it kind of speeds up the process when it comes to gathering resources. For one, you do need less workhorses early on in the game, which is crucial because you will not have access to as many resources as you would later on. So you want to min max your gathering speed and gathering methods. Two, gather speed is always welcome no matter what, and there is no hard soft cap when it comes to how much gathering speed you can have at any time. If anything, the more gathering speed, the better. You notice that the Spring Warden, however, has an increased march speed when it moving towards resource points, but that is only towards the points. It doesn't have any other benefits. So, in hindsight, Spring Wardens, one of the worst factions, or rather the worst faction for gathering resources. It'll be a toss up between the League of Order and Wilderberg because the Wilderberg faction workhorses or work rhinos grant an extra resources when they exhaust a resource point, which is roughly around, I think it was either 5% or 10% when you finish a resource node. So, in hindsight, you are gathering more resources than you usually would. Late game, I would definitely recommend switching to Work Rhinos if they also to Wilderberg. I mean, if they also fit your commander setup. If you want two Archer marches and all the buffs that the Wilderberg faction provides, I personally think that I will end up switching to the Wilderberg faction pretty soon because their troops overall synergize much better with my commanders than the League of Orders currently do, and the meta is shifting, but that's a topic for a different video. So just to summarize, each faction, workhorses provide extra load capacity, work elk provides march speed towards resource points, and finally work rhinos provide extra resources when you finish a resource node. After you're done setting all that up, let's visit the economy tree and which skills to which researchers to focus on when you're starting out in Call of Dragons in order to maximize your gathering speed and not waste precious time researching stuff that might not be as rewarding and pay themselves back as other techs. So, starting off, what we want to grab is supply chains as fast as possible. We want to grab these four also as fast as possible because they tend to pay themselves off pretty quickly, with mana harvesting between 1 and 2 being the first ones you pick up because mana, like I said, or like I mentioned earlier, being the most important resources as time progresses and you progress further into Call of Dragons. It is the most valuable because, for one, it cannot be sent or traded between your allies. Two, they cannot be looted from cities, making them a real commodity resource, which is super important and super rare, and well, just overall enter every single aspect later on in the game as you progress. And then finally, of course, we want to grab supply chains 2, followed by all the good harvestings 3. Usually, the rule of thumb would be finish up mana, finish up ore, then finish up gold and wood together at the same time, because gold and wood are not only super fast to research, they're also super fast to gather in general, while mana and ore tend to be slower due to the time needed to finish a single node in comparison to the amount of resources a gold node would finish. So, what that means is that we're gonna visit the open field now and discuss or break down what that means in general. So, as we can see here, a level 5 node for mana provides 252,000 mana, while a level 5 node for gold provides 756,000 gold. Now, usually, when you deploy or gather resources in a node that is within the alliance territory that you have, what you want to do is always gather those first because they usually have a 25% bonus gather speed in comparison to any nodes outside your alliance territory. So, for example, all these nodes are inside my territory, so if I gather them, I'm going to have a 25% gather speed, while this node is not in my territory, so it is gonna gather 25% slower than what I usually might get gathering inside my territory. Two, Always try to set up the best marchers for gathering the highest buffs. You can see here in the total hero buff breakdown, this is mainly the buff provided from your commander plus your item, or rather your artifact. So in my example, I'm using Lucia's Horn, which currently provides up to 33% gather speed in comparison to other artifacts. So I always want to use this march first in order to gather any resources. Usually it might automatically set swordsman. I don't know why it does that. So do try to pay attention and micromanage which units you want to send out. And you don't want to send too much low capacity outside because you want to maximize the amount of troops you send out, and at the same time gather just enough resources to not waste any precious time in comparison to having to spread out your workhorse army too thin. What you want to build, however, over time is mainly try to have around between 150,000 to 200,000 workhorses or work rhinos or work elks, no matter whichever faction you have, because that will be mainly enough for you to sustain you throughout the progress of the game. We're going to send out here the 250 just to gather the mana node, and then we're going to send out Kella here, for example, on the wood node, and we're going to see how long both of them take. So as we can see, the mana pool is taking me 1 hour and 70 minutes. Now this is pretty quickly because considering I am fully maxed out when it comes to the economy tree, my pan is pretty much almost maxed out when it comes to it's her skills and her talents. And well, she has a really good artifact. You'll notice that the gather speed for my wood is not as fast as my mana. However, if we break down the amount of time taken between both, if I gather, say, for 3 hours wood and I gather for 3 hours mana, I will end up with higher amounts of wood because the nodes provide more. So you want to finish up the smaller nodes as fast as possible in order to go into the next one and try to accumulate as much mana as possible. One other thing you want to keep in mind when you are gathering in the open field is try to gather from the alliance building, because for one, the alliance building does have faster gather speed than nodes, and it also provides bigger loads. So usually what you want to do with your alliance is always try to build mana wells, because for mana is one of the most important resources in Call of Dragons, and I cannot stress how important it truly is, because later on in the game you will need a lot of it, and it comes by super difficult because it is not as present or prevalent as the others in terms of gather speed or in terms of availability in general. So you always want to keep a march inside the manual of your alliance at any given time, because it is safe, it is untouchable, and no one can really raid it unless you are retreating. Which brings me to the next step of keeping your gatherers safe. In general, if you are being raided, try to be careful because gathering marches tend to be super squishy and they tend to get one shot pretty quickly by any march that just looks at them, especially if you are running the work horses, work rhinos, work elks, or whichever transportation type troop you have, because they are super squishy. So if any march comes close to them, they will one shot them. That is it when it comes to gathering resources and the most efficient way to go about it. Last but not least, the artifacts. There are a few gathering artifacts in general in Call of Dragons, but I will tell you the best ones, in my opinion, are the ones that have the overall gather speed, which are sadly at the moment only two of them. You have Lucia's Horn, which is also the only method right now to access level 7 resource nodes. So if you have it, try to get it up as fast as possible in order to access higher than usual resource nodes. I do have it level 5 and always try to use it off cooldown, which is something I am not currently doing, which is a mistake from me, by me, sorry. So don't repeat my mistakes, learn from them, and improve upon them. The second artifact that has gather speed is the enchanted coins, but since it is an advanced artifact, it has a maximum level of 30 and a maximum overall gather speed of 10%. You always want to try to level up your gathering artifacts later on in the game because the combat artifacts tend to be more valuable like early on unless you're a small player and care more about the progression of your resources than you do in terms of open field and such. It is your choice how you choose to level up your artifacts in the end, just to have some things in mind. Next up, there are some Legion capacity artifacts. They are mainly not that useful because, as mentioned earlier, Legion capacity is sort of a bait stat to have because, for one, you're not really using it efficiently at all at any stage of the game because you're not going to really be burning any cities, and later on you're just going to have enough troops to cover a node because there aren't really any big nodes at the moment, and you're never really going to hit your full legion capacity when you are gathering from an alliance. Well, if you send out a march that has a capacity of over 2 million, you're never going to hit that 2 million anyways. So don't fall for the stat that might be a little trap. My second favorite artifact, however, is the green finger sickle. The green finger sickle, sorry. It kind of gathers the resources instantly from any node. So if I am in a node that has 252,000 and I press the active, it's going to gather instantly 160,000 from it, and so on and so forth for ore and gold. It does have a 12-hour cooldown, so try to use it as many times as you possibly can. The second legendary gathering, which is kind of strange one, is the ancient tree roots. I don't get it's active. I think it's kind of useless, kind of worthless. If you figure out a use for it, please do let me know in the comments down below. And of course, there is the illusionary gems, and well, finally the storm leaf for the extra legion capacity as well. So you have five, five in total, or sorry, six in total artifacts that can impact your gathering one shape or another. Two of them are the super important ones: Lucia's Horn, which can also be obtained for free from the Dark Chest if you are lucky with the last 100th draw, and it also appears in the artifact keys. And of course, the enchanted coins. These two will be your bread and butter when it comes to gather speed, and then the legion capacity will be up to you. However, do try to use the green finger sickle as much as possible in order to maximize your gains. That is it for gathering resources and knowing the best practices and the best methods in order to gather resources as much as possible. And one final extra tip is try to open the notifications for the game in order to know when your legions come back, in order to send them back out straight away to gather again and again and again. This option is not currently present in the PC version, but it will be present in the mobile version, so do try to tick that option. If you like videos like this, please drop a like. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you have more video requests, please do let me know in the Discord. I've left the link of it in the comment in the description of this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Meow meow.